grateful for you all being here today. Thank you very much. And I think one of the things that we've been kind of as a theme throughout the morning, everyone has been talking a little bit about the things they're excited about, the projects that they've just seen that they're most excited about. You all are all making things, so I could ask you what VR, AR project you've completed most recently, and what did you learn? I want to know at least one thing that you learned doing this most recent project, and tell us about your role in your company as you do so. Agatha.
Thank you. So I'm Agatha. I'm here from Unity, and probably most of you know that Unity is the engine on which about 2/3 of all VR and AR content is built. But the reason why I'm actually here is that we also have a massive ads business. We reach about 1 billion people on mobile advertising every month. And so we really came into the AR, VR space thinking how we can bring advertising there. So the most recent project that we completed, was a VR ad for Lionsgate, the movie Jigsaw. So it was about a 1 to 2 minute experience that we integrated into existing VR apps and scared the heck out of people, and did a brand study to measure how much we scared people. So I learned a lot about biometric testing and stuff like that, and when your palms sweat and when your muscles tense up, and et cetera, inside of VR, and how that all works. And then also just, and I'm sure this is probably familiar to everyone, but just how important sound is and how that just in VR makes it so much more immersive. So that's our project.
And we'll come back to that theme of instrumenting and analytics and numbers and metrics, because that's going to be really important to scaling this. Jessica.
So hi, I'm Jessica Lauretti. I'm the global head of RYOT Studio, which is the award-winning global creative studio for all of Oath. Oath is a company owned by Verizon and is a recent merger of AOL, Yahoo, and their 50 publisher properties, including HuffPost, TechCrunch, Engadget, and a variety of others across categories. I could say 2 really quick examples that I think have been interesting for us. One, we recently did a branded content 360 series for an auto client, and I think we really spent a lot of time learning there. How do we talk to clients about what their expectations should be, and how to really use these formats in good and effective and interesting ways? Another example on the augmented reality side, we recently did a partnership with Time Inc.'s The Foundry and Coors, where we did an AR-enabled cover of Sports Illustrated. And there I think the real learning is about how important partnerships and collaboration really is. We're bringing different people with different assets and different contributions together to do some innovative and fun projects.
So hi, my name is Matthieu. I'm part of a team at Google called The Zoo, and I'm the head of creative innovation in that team. So my job is pretty much to work between Google and all the big brands and creative agencies and explain to big brands how they can use Google technology to tell stories or to solve problems. So my latest VR project is actually a project I work with you, so I will let you talk about it. It's called PopKiss Studio, but I have another project also I released personally recently that is an augmented reality project that is called the Gnome Cam. And that's the Gnome Cam.
Gnome Cam, okay.
Like a gnome, like a garden
For the
gnome.
holidays.
Yep. And it's an AR-core app where you can display a garden gnome everywhere around the world. And there are actually 250,000 different combinations of that gnome. And you trigger the different combinations based on your context, based on the time, the weather, the location, the nearby location, etc. And the big learnings from that experiment for me is that really, every single place is unique in time and in location and in space. And that's actually an opportunity, for storytelling, to be able to use the context, to be able to tell stories that are going to be different everywhere you try them. And that's where I'm very excited about augmented reality now, is that idea that if the world is a playground, where you can define framework stories, but then you can let them live all around the world and see what happens to it, So big learning, how can you play with context when you're telling stories as you're starting to use the world as a playground?
Horror, sports, gnomes, what's next?
I'm John Misirlioglu. I'm the group creative director for Studio 6, which is a content and design studio that sits under the Havas group. And the most recent project we just finished, Matt and I collaborated on, was called PopKiss Studio. It was a project we did for Hershey's where we let the audience use the iconic Hershey Kiss as a blank canvas where they can create their own piece of pop art. It was a fairly new thing for a client like Hershey's. It was a huge learning experience for us, I think, at least for me. In addition, the big learning for me was, in addition to the ongoing learning that you have to do on your own end in terms of creative and technical, there's also a lot of education that has to happen between the client and the studio and the agency. So the one big learning was to taking that time up front to set up the right processes and expectations, and down to like, how are we going to look at work? That fundamental question comes up all of a sudden. You're used to storyboards and maybe even sample clips and renders and this and that. Now, all of that stuff kind of goes out the window when you're talking about an immersive medium. So that was a huge learning for us.
Keith?
Hi everyone, I'm Keith Soljacich. I'm a VP of Emerging Technology at Digitas. I'm our subject matter expert for immersive technology, working with clients across North America, globally, and just absolutely love the project we released earlier this year called Gen Air Noir VR. Starting from the genesis of the idea that the client came to us, Gen Air, they make luxury appliances for their kitchen, and said, we would like to debut our 2018 line of appliances for the wide audience. But we don't have appliances. They're not actually created yet. So how would we do that? And then our team collaborated and said, great, virtual reality is the only way to go, essentially, to put somebody in, not only in front of these gorgeous new appliances, but in an environment that you create.
So selling things that don't even exist yet.
Selling things that don't even
All
exist yet, right. Marketer's dream. And what we learned on that, and I was touching on this, is that you don't have to put that person in a store or in a kitchen. You can create any world you want around those appliances and give that user any feeling you want to give them, or set up that story however you like. So we started off in a cave. And we ended up in a room that just evoked the brand. And just being able to reinvent the environment and how we tell that story, and the power of virtual reality and augmented reality to be able to do that. We couldn't have done that any other way a few years ago.
So let me ask you this, because we're a couple of, this is the third year of this conference. People have, the enthusiasm, the hype's growing around virtual and augmented reality. Clients, agencies, brands, we're all a bit into this at this point. What is different now about what your clients are asking you to do versus a couple years ago or a year ago? Maybe Jessica, I'll ask you that first.
Yeah, I think that 2016 was really the year of 360 video and VR is what we were hearing all day, every day. I think 2017 was the year of AR, and now what I'm hearing a lot of is voice, AI, chatbot. How do we start to play in that space? Yeah, so that's something that we've been really starting to build some beta experiences around for clients, to try to figure out how we can really integrate our publisher offering with our data and distribution and scale. Like, how do we get all of these pieces to work together in a meaningful, cohesive way?
Mm-hmm. Agatha, you can make that possible?
Maybe. Unity is not really in the AI space as much. So we will, obviously we're more AR, VR, so I'm hoping that also 2018 will be more the year of AR as well to build on that.
What else are you building for clients that's, you've got some new offerings, some new things you're working on?
Yes, so specifically in AR. So sorry, that was an awkward transition.
My fault. Yeah.
So we are really excited about basically AR being in everyone's pocket, and I think the metrics are something like 93% of Apple phones are going to be AR compatible by the end of next year. So since the vast majority of apps in AR are built on Unity, kind of starting with Pokemon Go, which wasn't really technically AR, now going into truly immersive AR, we're currently in beta and then releasing a product next quarter that will basically bring the full power of AR interactive content into an ad platform, so into a scalable unit that can run across multiple apps, either just regular interactive 2D apps or also AR apps. And just seeing the difference between how your product looks when you have the right lighting, when you can walk around it, when it's truly integrated into your space in a meaningful way, is really exciting because it's kind of taking the fun of like a Pokemon Go to the next level. So that's what we're psyched about.
So
and working
part of
on.
that is that clients are asking you, they want to be able to use assets across a variety. They want to be able to do more.
Yes, they definitely want to be able to do more, and I think, there's a lot of great players in this space in AR doing a lot of just fun executions, because the power is you're kind of bringing the brand into the user's world for the first time. So they want to figure out how you get outside of just a single app, how you do more of a mass reach type engagement, but still have it be meaningful and deep as opposed to like just putting a 2D object or something into an environment.
Yeah, and the client agency dynamic is changing, versus 10 years ago, 20 years ago in advertising, because it was, what's our TV spot this year? What are our radio spots? And what billboards are going to put up? Oversimplifying. And the agency would go and figure that out because they were experts in that area. Now, and where the agency is evolving and the clients are evolving, is this always-on collaborative relationship, right? Not only are the clients going out and learning about new technologies like AR and VR, the agency, I know I can speak for Digitas, we have a very flourishing research and development lab as well. So it's going both ways, is my point, is that the agency is bringing these technologies, emerging technologies to the client, and the client is doing the same thing, and then we all come together and say, what's right for the brand? And boy, AR and VR are so right for brands right now, because you just get to create a space, an experience for that you couldn't necessarily do with TV.
We see a lot of always that same phenomenon of like test and then rationalize. And we saw that with VR 3 years ago this year, where first a lot of brands wanted to be the first one, the first cocktail making experience, the first flying the sky, all that kind of things. Really, you're going to focus on like innovation stunts. We're going to make something very cool. We're not going to reach out to a lot of people, but then we're going to promote that with a video on social media. I think that was really what we saw like the first year, like 3 years ago. And this year, for the last 12 months, it was more now rationalizing, okay, and how do we really reach out to consumers now with VR? What are the right use cases? Not just making something for the sake of it, but also now being a little more strategic. And that's what we saw, for example, with Hershey, which is, okay, we know that the reach of VR is very limited now. So how do we reach out to people? Well, retail is great. Let's create something that we're going to distribute in retail space. Let's make the retail space, like our store, a great, magic, wonderful land, and that's a good way, to reach out to consumers. I think AR is pretty much in the same kind of cycle. So 2 years later, where now people are really willing to test. What's exciting is that we are now going to have to deal with the same reach issue that we had with VR, meaning by end of next year, we're talking about 800 million people with AR Core, AR kits in their pockets. So brands are excited to know that they're going to be able to reach out to these people, but they're not there yet in a way that they don't know conceptually what are going to be the right fit, the right stories, the right services. So they're really in the testing pilot mode. And that's what we see on our side at Google. There's a lot of pilots, a lot of experimentation to understand at the end of the day what are going to be the right platforms and right stories.
Yeah, I can also attest to that too. I feel like we often think of VR and mixed reality and AR as like concepts for videos. Is essentially what you're doing. So we did a project recently, our UK team, for the film Mother, where we did an AR activation in King's Cross. We made a mural of the movie poster and then had an AR activation, which is only reaching, a pretty big audience there in a public space, but still not a huge audience. But then the video that you make around it can then get distribution at scale, had like 15 million views across our platform. And it's kind of a good way to let people test these things out and try them while still giving them some of the security and safety and ROI that they're really looking for their project. So it's a lot of things are still very innovation-based, like beta testing of these kind of new immersive formats.
Yeah, in our experience as well, I think that's one thing that's kind of changing over. In the past, especially VR experiences were thought of these standalone things that were just going to sit there, and if it succeeded, it succeeded. If it's not, oh, we played, whatever. But now, our understanding, as it should be, it's a touch point. It's a part of a string of experiences and types of content that supports the brand, and that's really when it becomes more powerful, as opposed to you spend all this effort and money and you wait for people for the 200 people to experience it.
Well, so let's talk about that, because advertising at scale, driven by metrics, driven by analytics, driven by ROI. There are already startups that are starting to emerge that promise these types of analytics for virtual and augmented reality. You're working on some things, I'm sure. Let's talk about that for a minute. We talked about the dreaded words ROI. What's going to change in 2018 with regard to how we get at describing the numbers in a way that marketers care about?
I see 2018 as like a year where we're going to establish the benchmarks for augmented reality. Like we have no idea what.
So
are
what
going
are
to
the
we don't know what are going to be the numbers. We just know
GRPs and
we have the existing ad formats and advertising metrics, stuff like engagement rate, click-through rates. At the end of the day, how much do I impact my business? How much people love me more or less after the ad? So I think that pretty much this year is going to be, once again, a year of testing, especially for AR, where all the brands are going to try campaigns in smaller markets sometime, or just on a few cities, and try to test on these existing metrics, and also try to understand if any new metrics. When you have like a new media, the first thing you do is to use the old techniques. So for VR, we have like, okay, let's look at movie making and let's try to apply that to VR. And the same is for also measuring. We try to measure it the way we used to measure old channels and old platforms, and I'm sure that it's going to be a mix of old stuff and new metrics we need to create. The degree of immersion, the empathy, you talked about empathy before, like these are things we're not really measuring yet. So brands are still thinking TV, they're still thinking, they're too often the way they used to think, 20 years ago. So yeah, once again, benchmark creation, experimentation, and probably 2019 is where they're really gonna solidify all of that.
Yeah, I think too that brands are starting, like the education is really starting to catch up once people have done at least like one of these projects and tested it out. And it's really more now, I don't think people are looking at VR and AR as like something that is going to solve all of their problems, where they did a couple years ago. Like I think they're starting to say like, oh wait, this is just another tool in the toolkit. It's just like another tactic, like social media strategy and digital strategy and all these other things. And like, okay, so if we think about it like that and these touch points and how we connect it to a larger strategy, I think that is starting to make sense for people and will really kind of come to fruition in 2018. But that helped with the global scale of the AR kit is just gonna completely transform the way people understand and have access to information and experiences.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're still like crawling out of the ocean with VR and AR, getting our feet on the ground, and you didn't fail, you learned something. I'm a big proponent of that. And just looking at how the long view, right, on AR and VR, like what do we need to get to? Like what's our long-term goals here? And with AR in particular, it's just, if you looked at the performance of your website in 1995 and you said, this is just, I'm not selling my widgets, or these ads aren't generating revenue, and you said, let's just scrap the website and scrap display ads. And where would you be today? You'd probably be out of business. So I look at it very similarly in that way right now is, it's way more learning than succeeding, and that's okay. And I think there's a scale, right? Where you can't go spend millions and millions of dollars to learn something. So how can we learn something within reason, move on to the next thing?
And to Keith's earlier point, it's an entirely new space for brands to exist in. It's not just importing what you had into this box and then have people look at it. It's a completely different paradigm, and it's kind of like, if you remember the old days of Flash, also to get back to some retro references here, it's like people were like, oh, let's recreate the reality as we know it in this interface. And there was a lot of buttons and things, and there was all these intense things that were ultimately trying to recreate something you could do in real life anyway. And then we moved out of that and we moved into this imaginary kind of way of using those tools. And I think VR, I'm really excited about it because it's going to let us, but also brands, exist in that kind of imaginary world that was just simply not possible to create before.
Yeah, and I guess to build on the imaginary world part, at Unity, obviously we've been a game engine for forever, and now we're an AR, VR, 3D content engine. But it's interesting how much of the gaming principles we've been starting to apply in AR, VR, just in the sense of the user has always had agency in the story when you're in a game. What you did impacted how you went through the story, though the goal was still the same. It's still the same boss at the end or whatever it is. And so in AR, VR, we're actually, the way we've been approaching it, and I agree, it's a totally new space. Everyone's experimenting. There are no actual right answers today. But one way to kind of what you were also alluding to what Matt was saying, where you take from the past and bring into the future, we've been looking exactly at gaming metrics. So what is engagement like in a game? What's good, what's bad for in-game integrations, in-game ads, and all that's been around for forever. And then now applying that to AR, VR, and it's the metrics have been obviously way better because it's so much more immersive, but the principles are somewhat similar in the sense of telling someone what to do, but giving them the ability to engage. And actually that engagement in and of itself is more powerful than even the platform. And that's also something we measured, where passive engagement in VR has a much smaller impact than active engagement in VR or anywhere, I'm sure. So yeah.
If I can react to that, I think that's a very important point. Game makers have been playing with 3D and physicality for 20 years, and they know how to tell a story in space. They know how to make someone go from point A to point B virtually. And that's what is very exciting now also with augmented reality, especially for me, is that if we talk advertising, we think, flat 2D screens, measurement, and stories, when we are obviously moving now into the physical world. So we are going to move in a world where, for brands, how do I actually, almost trigger different events in different parts of the city? My city is not, it's like a book. The city is a book, neighborhoods are chapters, the streets are, sentences. How do I measure that? How do I make people go from point A to point B? How do I tell a story by having people, playing with something and then entering in my store? All these are the things we didn't do before. We're going to be able to do now, and we don't have any benchmark. We don't have a measurement for that. And I think gamification is probably the only thing we have today in game design for sure.
And for brands, there's two ways to look at it, and I'll take AR for an example, right? You've got the entertainment portion, right? Well, we love these experiences, and you can experience the brand, and it's a whole new way. But boy, the utility is equally as important as some of the experiences, because the way, I think probably the biggest change we'll see with AR is in shopping, and how we're able to visualize something in the room or experience something that we would have had to go to a store for, or right now click on a website and look at 2D images. All that is going to shift away. And so looking at the utility for brands in AR, how do you enable yourself as a brand to not just be a product, but a utility around that? Can you layer on additional contextual elements to things around you, or does your brand stand for something that can represent itself in a virtual way? Those are all great opportunities for brands beyond just the entertainment.
Yeah, I can tell you too, I actually just returned from a long trip across Asia, and they are like leaps and bounds ahead of what people are doing in the States in terms of AR e-commerce. I mean, people are regularly using AR to walk down the street, stop in front of a clothing store and say, oh, that sweater's cool. You can click on it. It will curate 5 things that you may like based on that. And then you can literally click and buy, put it in your shopping cart. Like, it connects to your cart and it gets delivered to your home. So I think we're going to start seeing that stuff come to this side of the world pretty soon. It's pretty awesome and like works really well. And like you can just see, like, I think the future of advertising is really about like creating services and experiences that make people's lives better. And that's one that you can say, like, people just want to use it. It's easy to use. It makes your life better. It's like kind of a no-brainer.
Have you seen the movie Hyper Reality? Well, I think that's exactly what we don't want AR and VR advertising to be, meaning like a distraction, something in your face. You know, it's funny, we talk about the 90s. In the 90s, you know, we saw the creation of pop-up ads and all the horrible stuff, you know, that didn't have to exist. And now in a spot where hopefully, you know, people working in the industry are going to be a little more responsible when creating, you know, this ad. And we don't need just to take banners and make them live in AR. We can be a little more smart. And that's why I agree 100% that an ad doesn't need to be a distraction. It doesn't need to be something in your face that, you know, just try to sell something. It can be more like an experience, can be more utility, where you bring value to users. And I hope that's where we're going to go. I'm sure people will try to create the pop-up AR ads of the future, but at the end of the day, it's also about what will, you know, react correctly with users. You know, users will decide to engage with things or not, and hopefully they won't engage with that kind of things.
And one quick point about branding as it relates to AR and VR, especially, like in a culture where the internet is just accelerating the way we churn through aesthetics, right? We just consume it so much faster than how we used to, and I think we're gonna start to see the limits of pure branding as well. Like, you can only push brand guidelines up in someone's face so far, and even retail. I mean, this is my personal point of view, but you know, even some of the most revered retail experiences can feel like Squarespace templates, you know, because they're just churning through like a visual after aesthetic, and then this type, and then this collab. It's like we're churning through it so fast, where through the enabling of utility and things that we actually care about, I think we could be looking at a brighter future than pop-up ads for sure.